What's up, guys? Tonight I want to teach you how to play against Sicilian in a very unorthodox way. This video is thanks to Theo and a good friend of mine and the guy who helped me to create my course Butcher the Sicilian. And if you really want to crush the Sicilian, then you have like 2 more days to get my course on the discount. Go on Chessable and get it there, Butcher the Sicilian. But if you really want to take a look at another way of like fighting against Sicilian, I also suggest this video as well. Just like I said, thanks to Theo, who likes to play Dutch with black pieces. He said, Maya, can you do how to crush Sicilian with reverse Dutch? I said, that's a good idea, and let's try this out in this lesson. And here I created like a pretty good base of the modal games where I'm just going to try to present you an ideas. So let's immediately jump into the action and go with the first moves. E4, c5, and believe it or not, bishop e2. Here I just made all these arrows in the different colors to show you what the real ideas are. The idea of this move is basically for white is to be able to create, first of all, a very nice and attacking, typical for the GPA type of the game that starts after d3, f4, knight f3, short castle, and then you have flexible modern approach with c3, and then you have another approach with queen e1 and queen h4. Also, bishop on e2 also keeps the possibility to recapture on d1 with the bishop in case black executes the exchange d5 and d takes e4 in the center. So what white actually wants in this position is to play f4 to control the center, to play knight f3 and d3 to complete development, to make the short castle, and afterwards to go with either queen e1, queen h4 and execute the attacking plan similar to the Grand Prix attack, or to go with a flexible plan that is very typical for all these fashionable variations lately, but also to the guy who's like the main representative of this line. His name is Vladislav Kovalov from the Belarus Republic. Let's go with this stuff. And also you just have to keep it one more thing in mind, but I'm going to talk about that more during the lecture. Sometimes when you swap off the knights, you'll be able to bring your bishop back to d1 in order to defend potentially weak c2 square. Let's go into the games. There are like so many options for black, but most of these options are part of the same plan for white, and they actually tend to transpose into the same type of position. So what do we have to know here? First of all, that the only different ideas in comparison to the classic variation are e6 and e5. Everything else, knight c6, g6, d6, are part of the same plan. Let's get started first with e5. Those who play e5, they made a serious commitment on the light squares, so we have to punish that. We go with the bishop c4. Don't absolutely be afraid to make such move. Bishop c4 gives you a nice and an active game, improves the position of your bishop, and probably, and the most importantly, you just get like a pretty good control of the light squares on this diagonal afterwards. Although I have to show you how are you supposed to develop your pieces in this position. So what do you have to do? You gotta go with knight c3, you gotta go with d3, and very important to go with knight g on e2. This reminds me on my course, Butcher the Sicilian, where you play the second move knight c3 and kill all those black Sicilian positions in the hyper-modern fashion. In those, I gave a model game of Grandmaster Tiviaco where he went for this plan and went for castle and f4. Then I added like a couple of correspondence games where the guys went with the ideas such as f4 castle, and a very important thing, f5, to prevent a light square bishop of being, like possibility to be exchanged. a3 to keep like the, so you go castle, you do f5, you go a3 to have shelter to bring the bishop back in case you need it, and then you go knight g3, bishop g5, and knight h5, launching the kingside attack. Remember this plan, it's a very nice one. Another possibility that is unlike to be part of the previous lines is, just like I previously told you, e6. So what about e6? When they go with e6, you go with f4. They go d5, you go d3. This is what I told you in the beginning of this lecture. If they ever capture on e4, now we can see one of the points of having that bishop. You just take by bishop on d1 and keep the healthy pawn structure. In practice, these positions turned out to be way easier for white, because we can always oppose the 96-94 idea with c3, keep the flexibility of our game. Well, they have lots of problems with the light square bishop and even with the dark square bishop afterwards. After they go with knight c6, you go knight f3, and I want to show you a real brilliancy, and I'm simply free to say one of the model games for a better understanding of this system. The game was played between Kovalenko and Bilgun in Poland 2015. So let's take a look at the game. Black played g6. Looks like he plays a flexible type of a system that is, like typical against the closed Sicilian. You go castles, bishop g7, and queen e1. Kovalenko was preparing himself to slowly but surely place that queen on h4 at some point once the knight goes on e7, for example. After knight g on e7, Black still hasn't committed himself with a short castle. So Kovalenko still doesn't want to play that queen h4 idea, and he plays a very flexible idea c3. I have to say that even though I'm showing you a game of Kovalenko here, who's one of the top Latvian guys, I once again have to repeat that I found more than hundreds of games played by Grandmaster Kovalev from Belarus. So don't mix up these two guys. Kovalev was the one who on regular basis uses this c3, anticipating and softening up the bishop on g7 and its activity. After castles, knight to a3. This knight goes back to c2 and wants to get like the full flexibility of the game. After a6, knight c2, d4, bishop d2, b5. Black also seems to do absolutely fine in this position. Looks like he even has like a more of space, but I very much like our bishop on e2 that defends the pawn on d3. So after c takes, rook c1. From this point onwards, guys, get ready for a beautiful positional and also attacking game by white. I just have to say that I'm impressed with the white's play, with the white's game, and probably if I had to play for like 3 days, I wouldn't be able to find and to execute the following plan by white. I'm really impressed with his game this time. So after bishop b7, he brought this knight back to a1. For example, all of us tend to think about the moves like make them forward, not backward. I like this one, bringing the knight back to a1 and actually repositioning the knight via b3 to c5 eventually. That's what played. He played a5, knight b3, queen b6, and played knight c5. Now one might say, okay, this knight is good because we want to take this bishop. Well, why would you take the bishop if that bishop doesn't do anything concrete and good anyways? So after rook f to d8, by the way, he was also threatening knight d7 to do a fork. Rook f to d8, he finally played that queen on h4. Slowly but surely, we can definitely see that he's maybe eyeing some mating attack on the king side. The guy played bishop c8, and he brought his bishop back to d1. I like this one because he possibly wants to play a4, and in case of b4 or whatever, to play bishop b3, and afterwards with f5 or knight g5 to organize the kingside attack. Black goes with a4. He wants to stop any bishop b3 ideas. I also have to say that apart from a4 here, maybe the idea was a3, bringing that bishop to b3 and getting like a gray diagonal. Black plays a4. Absolutely fine move to stop the bishop b3 idea. He does b4, and he sends a message to his opponent. Man, if you do en passant, I'm going to take my bishop, and I'm once again gonna get this great piece. But not like this, because maybe the guy's gonna have knight a5, killing your bishop. So maybe the real thing could be to take, to maybe play b4 and go bishop b3. Actually, here you probably would have to decide whether you should take by bishop and after knight a5 maybe to play bishop a5 followed by a5, or to play like this, because I'm afraid that in some, probably like this, because in some of these positions after a takes b3, they probably could play some b4 and close both of your bishops and make them terrible. Anyways, the guy played f6, and a very special move came here. It's a3. Probably if I haven't made these arrows, you wouldn't understand the point of a3, but it's to do this fantastic maneuver and repositioning of the light square bishop. After rook f8, bishop c2, he finally brought his bishop onto the right square. In the meantime, Black also kind of improved his position, brought his rook to f8, improved the position of the queen on d6, but it didn't bring him much. He just has to wait. Poor Black, he just has to wait to get killed. And after rook a7, Kovalenko did g4. I like it because he's slowly but surely preparing his attack, and in these positions my general advice would be do not rush. Just be patient and do any kind of preps before you, I don't know, kill your opponent with either e5, f5 or g5 afterwards. The guy went for king h8 and he broke in the center with e5, bringing his knight back to e4. After that happened, played f takes e5, knight e5, and threatened mate on h7. After knight f3, rook f3, he played h6 and probably said, okay, let me breathe a little bit easier after a second exchange, but here h7 was hanging, so king h7 doesn't work because of checkmate after queen h6. So the guy played queen e8, and he didn't give him an easier time, sacked on e7, and after rook e7 played rook c8. And what I especially like about the end of the game, this is deflection to win the rook. When the guy went for queen c2, threatening both of bishops, played queen e6, threatening checkmate on g8, and when the guy played check, played bishop e1. Everything in this game looked just ideal for white. And that's why I started this lesson with this modal game, and I'm gonna end this lesson with another modal game played by Luke McShane, one of the strongest English GMs, who also executed the same plan and finished his opponent in a great fashion. This is how you're supposed to play this system. I also want to show you one more game played by Gavain Jones in the same system. So when his opponent played the same line e6, f4, d5, Gavain played d3. Once again, I'm repeating, no d takes e4 should be of, I don't know, you shouldn't fear any d takes e4, and you shouldn't avoid this kind of endgames because it's absolutely a pleasant experience for white players, as practice has shown. So after knight f3, knight f6, you just go with e5. Once again, I have to repeat, this reminds me on my Butchered the Sicilian course, and the second move knight c3 against, for example, some lines where after second move knight c6 you play bishop b5 and they go with e6. After knight d7, c4. I believe it's the best to immediately provoke your opponent. They're not supposed to wait. If they show any kind of like knight b6 flexibility, you go castles, you go knight c3. But I also like queen e1 followed by queen g3 planned with a possible kingside attack afterwards. You have all the time f5 ideas, bishop h6. You have a pretty pleasant attacking experience on the king side. After knight c3, castles, b3. I once again insist, you're not afraid of any kind of d takes, because after, for example, d takes, look at the terrible knight on b6 and inability to do anything with this knight afterwards. So in the game was bishop d7. Gavin played this game on chess.com entitled Tuesday, but I liked it a lot. So I'm giving you this game not because it's ideally played by black, because black certainly didn't ideally defend his game if he afterwards, you'll see, got mated that badly. But still, I liked the Gawain's plan and the way he was just slowly and like logically followed up with the ideas afterwards in the game. So after queen e1, queen g3, played queen h3. Looks like he made everything ready for a slow attack. Is he threatening knight g5? Well, not h6, but he found a way to bring this queen to h5 and slowly to prepare knight g5 with some weakening of the king side. When black played bishop c6, what I like about this game is inability by black to do anything special to defend this position. So after like bishop c6, he played knight g5, and after h6, he just sacrificed on f7. Let's take a look at the end of the game. Played f5, played queen g6, played f6 threatening f7, took, played rook f7, and after bishop h6, when the guy captured, took on h6, Gavin mated his opponent, rook takes h7. The game was very nice. I very much liked the plan by white in the game, and I believe that's why it was so important to show it to you. We have to see one more move that is not part of this, let's just say, classic plan. It's d5. Whoever plays d5, you just go with d3. In order to understand better point of this d takes e4 ideas, and of course queen d1, bishop d1, I just want to tell you that you always place your pawn on f4, you always play c3, and you always play knight f3 afterwards. Let's take a look at one game that happened after d takes e4. So the guy played g6, which is part of those ideas when they play knight c6, d6, g6, it transposes into the main line. And after f4, bishop g7, knight f3, d5, d3, d takes, queen d1, bishop d1. At the moment, we're analyzing a type of queenless middle game where black might say, okay, I swapped off the queens, I'm step closer to equalize the game or make the draw afterwards. So he played a b6, which is very normal move, because he finds a good way of developing this bishop. Once again, we're analyzing game of Kovalenko, and this time strong grandmaster Olszewski. After knight a3, he just wants to jump with this knight on b5. Bishop a6, he played c3. c3 kills two birds at the same time with one stone. You can play knight c6, knight d4, or knight b4 easily afterwards. And secondly, this bishop became very passive and in a way kind of useless in the diagonal. After knight d7, made a nice bishop e2 idea. I like this one because when you exchange the light square bishops, all of a sudden your knight gets some very nice and important squares. After castles, bishop e3, h3, limiting this knight and doesn't give a possibility for this knight to move afterwards. f6 played knight c4. And after knight c4, g4, get some space. Knight cd2, doesn't want to give him an easy time by swapping off the pieces. Played rook h2 f1, h4, c4, and after f5, he absolutely outplayed this guy in the queenless middle game. Very much like this game. I can show you just briefly how did he continue. played a3 to play at some point maybe b4, took on g6 to finally make a break, created a passed pawn on h5, removed this knight to a better square, played b4 since it's supported by that knight, took by knight. Usually everybody would take by pawn, but he wants to go on d5, and after he jumped there, wants to break with another knight, with either a4, a5 or c5. That's exactly what happened afterwards, and he really outplayed his opponent in a great positional style. The same thing happened in the first game that we analyzed here by Kovalenko, and I really enjoyed both of these games. They're really like nice. Okay, at some point maybe, not maybe, he didn't play like the best towards the end, but still the game was just fantastic. So you could have seen what happened in both of these games. You've seen one game played by Gawain Jones, and finally what happens if they just go after e4, c5, bishop e2. What happens if they go with that traditional plan? Knight f6, you just go d3, and you go f4, knight f3, castles. If they go g6, you go d3 with f4, knight f3, castles. If they go with d6, you just go d3, f4, knight f3, castles, and we reach the critical position. But in my opinion, if you're gonna reach this position, I believe that most of your opponents will play that from the knight c6 move. Knight c6 looks to me very logical, because most of your opponents, I'm talking about the lower rated guys, will say, okay, I develop my knight and I want to maybe jump on d4 to harass the light square bishop. We're not afraid for it. You play f4. When they play g6, which is going to be the reaction by most of black guys, you just go with knight f3. Bishop g7, castles d6, d3, and knight f6. After that happens, somebody asked me, can they go with e6? Of course they can, but in that case, you use a flexible approach. You play c3, fighting the bishop on g7. You play bishop e3, going for some d4 at some point, knight bd2, but here you play like a whole bunch of waiting nice moves in order to improve your game on the queen side before you decide to kick off with d4 in the center. Most of your opponents will play knight f6, and this is a very important crossroad for this line. Lately, way more popular than the move I want to show you in this lecture is c3. It's way more popular, fashionable, and Kovalev, who's like the main guru of this line, plays this one. So after castles, he puts his king into safety. He wants to see what is black going to do. He literally won all his games there, and I can tell that after they play b5, I'm talking from black's point of view, and assuming that you're going to play against the good guys who are not going to play stupid a6 to play b5, rook b8 to play b5, but they're going to immediately kick off with b5 because there is no knight on c3 like in closed Sicilian, so b5 it might immediately happen. You just do a3 to stop and to force them to play this. Bishop e3, knight bd2, before a takes, now you have the rook on the open a file for yourself. Kovalev played d4, b takes, and I found like a big number of games played like this. This is a very compact setup for white, very nice control of the center, and white seems to be better. I found that he beat a couple of guys there. No one could resist but to play d5, and after e5, one guy played knight g4, bishop g1 and h3. He limited this knight, played bishop f2, and he really likes to get the c5 square with the knight. Another guy, actually Girl, played knight e4, captured, played knight g5. He won the pawn, and afterwards, once again, he, by jumping with this knight on c5, managed to win the game. But I want to show you something way better and something that you're gonna like much more. And in order to understand and go better with the ideas of this Queen e1 system, I gotta show you like following modal, three modal games. I have a game played by Luke McShane. I got a game played by a guy who you probably know, and his name and nickname sounds familiar, Ginger GM Grandmaster Simon Williams. And I found one more game apart from Luke McShane that was played by some German Ian. Let's get started with these games. And do I have to explain you that when you play your queen e1, you just want to go with this queen on h4, and you just want to launch the kingside action with f5. Whoever plays Dutch, he knows that this is traditional system of the Dutch, and that's why this system against the Sicilian is called reversed Dutch. After queen e1, let's take a look what happens. Actually, what happened in one of the games where black just went for bishop g4. Makes sense. Lots of guys play like this. They just want to remove the knight as potentially dangerous attacking piece. Ginger GM here played knight bd2, and a couple of other GMs went for that. Paravian young Russian GM went for that. He wants to just recapture by knight and get a nice kingside attack on the after knight takes f3 and f5, bishop h6, knight g5. Typical Grand Prix attack. I like it a lot, and we can say that probably that's the most logical reaction. Another very typical thing could be queen h4. Classic one. So they take, probably because you threaten here to, after h3, just force them to take anyways, but maybe you don't even need to. Probably they had to play castle instead of taking immediately. And lots of guys are going to do this one, thinking like, oh, let me just move your bishop. Not this time, baby. I'm gonna bring my bishop back to d1, and afterwards kick your knight away. This way. I keep that bishop here. I keep this bishop. I'm going to support some attack afterwards. You cannot even count on h5 as a defense because I might sack that bishop on h5. And eventually I can play c3 followed by some bishop b3, even taking like a good control of the light squares and diagonally to g8. After queen b6, c3, knight c6, knight d2. This German IM went for the full flexibility. Queen a6, attack the pawn, bishop c2, b5, knight f3, and played b4. He also plays classic approach. He wants to somehow activate this dragon bishop and wants to take on c3. What I like about the white's game was that he did everything in this game just in time. Broke in the center with e5. After b takes knight e5, played bishop d2 and played rook b8. This was a nice attempt by black in the game not to make castle, trying to see if he can hold a, like kingside pressure and somehow avoid the attack, but it didn't work. After a takes d4, rook b2, played bishop to b3, threatening the knight on d5. When the guy played knight c3, a beautiful end of the game was bishop f7, knight e5, captured, played bishop c3, and played rook to b1. When the guy finally won the piece, he probably didn't count on this nice rook b8 because you can't take it because of queen a7 mate. So when he played king d7, he ended up the game with a queen g4 because after e6 he couldn't stop checkmate with a rook f7. The game was played by Grandmaster Saul from Germany, and the game was played like 22 years ago, but I really find it great, and it's certainly one of the model games here. Apart from that, we just have to go back to the queen e1 idea, and we've seen what happens if they play bishop g4, trying to immediately swap off the light square bishop for the knight and to remove one of attackers in our game. But what happens if they go with c4, breaking like the pawn structure? We just place the king into safety. Castles, knight c3, c takes, bishop takes. Reminds me on one of the lines against the dragon defense where they just played, I believe, 11 fish variation with f4, bring the knight back to f3, and then they go with this bishop on d3, and queen goes with traditional queen e1, queen h4. Topalov lost like that against Judith Polgar. Here I'm showing you a game between Jan Rogers and Corina Pepton, strong woman GM from Romania. But look how white won. Queen h4, played bishop d2, played f5. This is what I like about this system. Everything what white does is very logical and very, like easy to follow and to simply cope with. He played rook to h3, hoping for some mates on h7, rook f1, and look at this ideal development by white. He just developed all his pieces, built up pretty strong attacking chances, and now we just have to see what's gonna happen. After bishop f4, brought this rook to g3, and everything was ready for mate. h3, bishop e3 kicking the rook away, bishop g5 threatened the knight, bishop e2, once again I'm talking about strength of the light square bishop that can always be sacrificed, and after bishop h6 played f6, completely killed the king side, and he was ready for final touch. It happened after bishop h5, and after g takes, bishop h6, rook g7, bishop g5, couldn't stop the checkmate, and black resigned. Another typical game, another easy flow game, easy to follow, easy to learn, and simply reply most of these ideas afterwards in your games. Finally, what happens after a short castle? Let's take a look at that famous game of Luke McShane and Cheparinov played in European Club Cup. Don't forget, black player was 2700, and it lasted, believe it or not, 12 more moves. After queen h4, black went for c4. We've seen already an idea like this, and McShane placed his king into safety. It's always good to do this prophylaxis, to place your king on h1 and to avoid any unnecessary or just annoying checks there. So after like c takes, bishop g4, they just want to get rid of the knight as a possibly attacking piece. Luke McShane, who was for a long time very well known and pretty good close Sicilian player, placed his knight on c3, and he's slowly but surely getting ready for the kingside action. After bishop f3, took by bishop. Queen b6 brought his bishop back to d1. I like this move. It's a multi-purpose move because he first of all opens up f3 for rook h3 idea, and he also wants at some point to place this bishop onto this diagonal and help to attack. After queen a6, black just went after the pawn on d3. Rook on f3 is such a nice move because it defends the pawn and it also wants to go into the attack. After rook fc8, rook h3, h5. Everything seems to be absolutely fine in black's game. Looks like his position is at least defendable, if not even better. And he may go with the b5, b4, knight b4, or in case of f5, what actually happened in the game, and I like it so much, black just went for knight e5. He threatened the pawn on d3. Get ready for a very fast and instant finish. Played bishop g5. And after king f8, Cheparinov realized that the king has to start slowly but surely get ready for some escape, but it was too late. F takes, bishop e3. I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned like the quality of that bishop d1 move and the strength of the light square bishop. And after knight to d3, his rook just came to f3, and bishop f6 followed by rook f6, knight d5, rook a to f1. Everything was simply pretty much common in this game. King cannot any more longer go there. It just has to stay in the center, and believe it or not, Cheparinov resigned. Guys, hope you like the bishop e2 system. Reverse Dutch. Once again, thanks to Theo a good friend and student of mine. And by the way, I once again have to remind you, 2 more days. My book and my course, Butcher the Sicilian, is on the sale, so go and get it. Let's crush the Sicilian. Bye bye and thank you.